The holiday season is upon us, and for many, the holidays offer a chance to get together with family and friends and enjoy spending time with those that are closest to us. Starting this Friday, December 6th, and going until December 29th, the Manitoba Theater for Young People is inviting audiences to rejoice in the holiday season by celebrating close friendships. The kind of friends that have been with you through thick and thin, the kind of friends that you would do almost anything for, and who accept you, warts and all. Based on the children's book series Frog and Toad, written by Arnold Lobel, that came out in the 1970s, MTYP is presenting A Year with Frog and Toad, the musical. This is a Tony Award-winning musical that was written by brothers Robert and Willie Reale. Robert Reale supplied the music, and Willie Reale wrote the text and lyrics for the songs. A Year with Frog and Toad, the musical, as presented by the Manitoba Theater for Young People, is sure to be charming and heartwarming production that will entertain you while at the same time giving you the warm fuzzies. It will make you want to reach out to your close friends over the holidays. And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about A Year with Frog and Toad, I am joined once again by the frog to my toad, Sarah Flynn, who is the artistic associate for MTYP. Hey, Sarah, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get to the Year with Frog and Toad, the last production MTYP performed was Where the Wild Things Are. That wrapped up on November 2nd. How was the run, and was it every bit as successful as it was when the company did it years ago?
It was a wonderful run. It was so lovely. I mean, I get to spend my days in the office hearing children screaming in the background as they become their wild things. And yeah, it was very successful. I think just as successful as it's always been. It's a whole new group of 3 to 8-year-olds from last time that it existed in Winnipeg. So they all got to experience it too and loved every minute of it.
That's fantastic. And then here on Friday, MTYP is presenting another great show inspired by another great children's book series, the Frog and Toad books that came out in the 70s. When I grew up, I miss these books completely. Were they part of your childhood at all growing up?
A little bit. I mean, they weren't Winnie the Pooh, which was my personal go-to as a kid. But I was definitely aware of them. They were around. I know people that read them. I'm sure my parents read them to me as a kid. I just don't necessarily remember all of them.
There are claymation versions of the book that you can find on YouTube. I watched a couple of them this morning to help me get into the vibe of what the book's about. They are super awesome. They are really just about being good friends and getting along. Is that one of the reasons why you think the books are so endearing and why this musical touches children so much?
It has such a lasting story of just like loving the people that you're friends with and getting to spend like a simple life with them. I think it's had a big resurgence recently, I think, as well, like within millennial culture, of this love and this like idealization of the simple life of just living in a cottage and having your best friend lives right across the street and you have tea every night. And it's just like the dream for everyone to just live a easy, simple life.
Yeah. With just these very good friends.
Best friends everywhere. Yeah.
This is a totally in-house production. In fact, the co-director of the production is also the artistic director for MTYP, Pablo Felices Luna. He has collaborated with Sarah Topham, who is the other co-director and choreographer for the show. Can you talk about how they brought the production to Winnipeg, and how close is the MTYP production to the Broadway show?
So the show's the same show, essentially. I mean, it was written by the brothers that you mentioned, William and Robert, and it's that show, but it's our production of it. So there's a whole new set design, whole new costume design, the lighting design, it's all in-house, and it's directed specifically by Pablo and Sarah, and they've known each other for 30 years. They are they're best friends. They're each other's Frog and Toad. And so they just have this really clear, beautiful vision for this show, and they work really well together, and they've just created this beautiful, warm story of Frog and Toad in their little pond, in their world. And so, it's still the Broadway version with its vaudeville songs, and it's flashy and catchy and big, but it all really boils down to that heart and that love that they have for each other. And that's something that I think Sarah and Pablo bring really, really well to the production.
Oh, it's going to be great. And it is a full-on musical. Both Frog and Toad are trained singers. Jen Lyon, who plays Toad, and Jaden Fraser, who plays Frog. They're total pros. What is the character of the music like? And what kind of Are there live musicians on stage? Can you talk about the music of it?
So the music for this production is pre-recorded because that made it, all of the other things that are complicated more possible. And so they've been able to practice with that from the beginning so that they're all used to it. But all of the singing is, of course, done live. It is still live theater. And it's that vaudeville style. It's like big showy numbers performance. It's all about this catchy story and catchy tunes. And it's big and performative. And Jen and Jaden are doing an incredible job of creating this beautiful relationship and singing these big, beautiful songs. At one point, Frog just sings this line that's like, "I love being a frog," and he just sings that, and it's just music to my ears whenever I hear Jaden sing it because it's so beautiful and strong and sweet, and they're incredible, and the music is just so fun and catchy and upbeat and a good time, and I just smile the whole time I'm watching it.
Fantastic. Each of the original books that were written consist of 4 short stories that make a poignant point. Is that the way the show is set up? Are there a few different stories that are told one right after another, or is there one plot line that runs throughout?
So it kind of is a bit of both. So it tells a year in their life. So we start in the spring, and they, Frog and Toad wake up from their, 4, 5, 6 month long hibernation. And then they, go through a year together. So they plant seeds and they tell scary stories. And then in the fall, they rake leaves. And then in the, they get back to Christmas time where they, make cookies. And it's a year in their life. And so there's each of these little vignettes. But then there's also through lines that go all the way through as well. Like, Toad is so upset because he never gets an email, or she never gets an email. And Frog goes, "I'm going to write a letter." And so Frog writes a letter to Toad and gives it to Snail. And then throughout the entire play, which is a year long, Snail is attempting to deliver this letter, but is so slow, and I think always kind of goes the wrong direction. And it takes until almost the end of the entire play for Snail to deliver this letter. And so there's little through lines throughout that create, this one big seamless piece throughout that's filled with these little vignettes of their lives throughout the year.
It's going to be great. One of the things that is constant throughout the stories that I gather is Frog and Toad's friendship. We've talked about it before. It never wavers. Can you talk about some of the life themes that the show touches on about friendship?
Yeah, so Frog and Toad are actually such different characters. They live life differently. They view the world in a very different way, but they have this enduring connection and this enduring love for each other that, no matter how cranky Toad gets, Frog is always just like, "That's my friend and I love her." And no matter how much Frog doesn't seem to understand the things that Toad is trying to get them to understand, she still loves this, beautiful view that Frog has of the world. And anytime they just keep wanting to do nice things for each other, like rake each other's lawns and send each other gifts. And they just do all these things together. And they, occasionally they don't get along, but then they immediately forgive each other because they love each other so much.
And it's not just Frog and Toad that are on stage. There's also other characters in the woods. Can you talk about some of the characters that audiences will see? And I gather they play sort of supporting roles, and Frog and Toad are sort of more central characters, right?
Yeah, so Frog and Toad are, the central characters that we're following a year in their life, but they're not the only characters in the pond. I mean, there's a lizard, and there's a turtle, there's a mouse, there's 3 different birds, there's the snail that I mentioned, and then they all create these other relationships and other characters throughout the story. So Snail is delivering the letter, and Turtle sings a whole song about Toad going for a swim, and and the birds sort of do a bit of almost like narration of bringing us into the world, and they all have these different roles that they play to support this year that we go through with Frog and Toad.
There are 3 actors, Emily Meadows, Hazel Wallace, and Gillian Willems, that make up the ensemble and play the other creatures. How do the costumes work? How do they flip between the costumes?
So the costumes are all a bit of an indication towards these animals rather than being in full animal attire. That's not really the vibe. It's more like kids that are animals. And so, that they're squirrels at one point because they have these squirrel tails, but they're also jocks. So they have their I think they have field hockey or lacrosse sticks with balls and they got their little skirts, but then they have their squirrel tails and their big squirrel hats. And so you always sort of know what they are based on some of those indicators in their costumes, but really they're these real human entities, but in this amphibian world.
But they have to make costume changes quickly, right?
Oh, yeah.
So how does that work?
I mean, you got Frog singing a song on his own, so then you're changing over to something else in the back. You can't see the backstage, but it is so perfectly choreographed, and everyone knows exactly where they have to be, exactly when they need to be there. There's 2 people backstage helping move things and lift things and throw things and put costumes on people, take them off and move things around. And it's a perfectly choreographed dance in the backstage world, trying to get all that stuff happening.
And can you talk about the lighting and stage design? Like, how are the woods and the swamp depicted on stage?
So, there's 2 little houses, and they are Frog and Toad's houses, and they have a bunch of nods to being, in this tiny world. So there's giant crayons that make up part of the roof of Toad's house, and there's a big flower petal, and that's the roof of Frog's house, and then the middle in between them is the pond, and so it's all painted as if this beautiful water, this with movement and stuff, and then there's grasses in the background, and then the lighting will get you into the parts where it's okay, well now it's we're telling a scary story and it's a scary area of the swamp, and there's the lightning, and then this one's the evening and there's a nice moon, and then it's daytime, there's the blue skies and everything, and so the lighting and the set sort of get to live throughout this seasons and these days with them, and they show us the seasons and the time of day based on, what's happening in the moment.
As artistic associate for MTYP, what has been the most exciting thing that you've seen as the show has been rehearsed and developed over this past month? And also, what are you most excited about seeing the children who take in the show?
I mean, one of my favorite things is always watching the actors really become these characters and really find their versions of who Frog and Toad and Snail and Lizard and Mole and yada, yada, yada are. And they find the specificity and the beautiful things that make those characters special, and how they can relate to them and how they can, embody them. And I always just love seeing, their new take on these timeless characters. So getting to see that, and then the relationships that they create is always my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited to see the kids start to experience the show too. And I mean, the way that the space is used is really special. So because we have such a special theater that has this big gallery around the back, and so there's points where there's birds on top of people's houses, and they characters will come out through the audience to exit, and so you just get to be a part of that world so much, and it's such a beautiful world that to get to be in it, you can't help but smile and laugh, and it just lights up the world.
It's going to be perfect. Sarah, as always, this has been so great having you here to talk about A Year with Frog and Toad, the musical. It sounds so excellent. Thanks for taking the time to stop by and talk to me today. It's been great.
So happy to.
For our Classic 107 listeners, A Year with Frog and Toad, the musical, as presented by MTYP, runs from Friday, December 6th through to Sunday, December 29th. For more details on showtimes, visit mtyp.ca or go to classic107.com. I've embedded a direct link to the site in the article that is up there now. Sarah, thanks again.
Thank you.